I'm Sakshi Sneha, your host for today. This webinar, titled Alcohol and Liver Disease Early Diagnosis and Prevention, is organized by Plasmagen Biosciences. Plasmagen Biosciences, which is based out of Bangalore, is a renowned name in the field of biopharma. It has been providing world-class plasma-derived medicinal products for more than a decade now. It aims to cater to the demand of immunological medicines worldwide to bring relief and longevity to the patients suffering from life-threatening diseases. This event has been organized by Plasmagen Biosciences under its CSR initiative Samvedna, Sanchetna, Samvad for the staff members and students of Kalinga Institute of Dental Sciences, Bhubaneswar, Odisha. It is a privilege for me to welcome all the attendees for today's webinar on behalf of Plasmagen Biosciences. I would take this opportunity to thank Dr. Adarsh CK for taking out time from his busy schedule and presiding over this webinar. Dr. Adarsh, who currently practices at BGS Global Hospital, Bangalore, is a well-known medical gastroenterologist having a rich experience of more than 17 years. He completed MBBS from JJM Medical College, Davangere. Then he pursued MD in General Medicine from Mysore Medical College, Mysore, and DNB in Gastroenterology from St. John's Medical College, Bangalore. Dr. Adarsh has performed more than 7,000 esophagogastroduodenoscopies, both diagnostic and therapeutic. He has successfully performed more than 1,500 colonoscopies and performed more than 240 esophagogastroduodenoscopies. He is well versed with advanced endoscopic procedures like enteroscopy, spyglass, capsule endoscopy, ERCP, and endoscopic ultrasound. He is a professional member of several medical associations like Indian National Association for Study of the Liver, Indian Society of Gastroenterology, Society of Gastrointestinal Endoscopy of India, while also being the awardee of several accolades at national conferences. Throughout his career, he has been active in publishing papers as well as being a speaker and chairperson in different national as well as international conferences. Now, requesting Dr. Adarsh to share his presentation and address us on today's topic.
So at the outset, I would like to thank Plasma Biogen Sciences as well as Kalinga Institute for giving me opportunity. So topic given to me for today's discussion is alcoholic liver disease, early diagnosis and prevention. I know this is a post-lunch session for most of you. You may be sleepy. I'll just go through a few of the important things. So I'll not take long time, maybe 20 minutes to half an hour, I'll finish it off. So this is something, which they requested because now we see a lot of youngsters and today's generation people who are indulging in alcohol. So what are the side effects of alcohol? Everybody knows, but then being in medical field, I would like to tell something about pathophysiology. What do we manage and what is the last option in liver disease? So alcoholic liver disease or ALD is the term that encompasses the liver manifestations due to alcohol overconsumption, including it's a spectrum of disease, basically alcoholic liver disease. It includes alcoholic fatty liver, alcoholic hepatitis, as well as chronic hepatitis and liver cirrhosis, which is the end stage liver disease. So alcoholic liver disease is usually caused by damage to the liver from years of excessive drinking. Just 1 day, 2 days, usually alcoholic liver disease does not happen. It takes few years and causes the liver to be inflamed, swollen. So basically, whenever there is inflammation, it causes hepatitis, and over a period of time, it causes fibrosis, giving rise to liver cirrhosis. The damage can also cause scarring, as I mentioned, which is we term it as liver cirrhosis, which is the end stage liver disease or final stage of liver disease. Once there is liver cirrhosis, it is not reversible. So the liver disease burden in India is enormous. We see quite a lot of number with 22.2 deaths per 1 lakh population attributed to cirrhosis. This is by Global Health Observatory data from WHO. And according to this study, 1 year mortality once the liver cirrhosis is there is as high as 28 to 30%. So 30% of the time, Once we develop liver cirrhosis, 30% of the people die within 1 year. So by 2 years, actually, it's more than 50 to 70%. So average lifespan once they develop liver cirrhosis is dismal without liver transplantation. So always patients ask me, sir, I take alcohol, is it significant? So how much alcohol is significant? See, it's all genetic. Some person who takes once in a week may develop liver disease. Some people who take every day, twice a day, thrice a day may not develop liver disease. That is all because of the enzyme polymorphism. But in general, if you ask, consumption of 40 to 80 gram per day for 8 to 10 years plus is significant amongst men. At the same time, in women, even half the dose, that is 20 to 40 gram per day consumption, is significant. So that can cause liver disease. This is scientifically. Women have double the risk of getting alcoholic liver disease when compared to men because their digestive system will be less capable to process alcohol, thus increasing the amount of alcohol reaching the liver. So basically, because of alcohol dehydrogenase polymorphisms, women are at higher risk of developing liver cirrhosis than men, but for the same amount of alcohol consumed. Next question, what is one standard drink or what is this 10 gram? I am telling you 40 gram, 80 gram. How do we measure it? So this is what it is. So 10 gram or one standard drink is 285 ml of full strength beer or 375 ml of light beer or 100 ml of wine or 30 ml of spirits, that is vodka, whiskey, rum. So 30 ml is equal to 10 grams. So that is how we calculate in general. But as I told, there is no specific dogmatic thing or nothing sacrosanct about it. It's all genetic polymorphism. Any dose can cause liver disease. So if you ask me what are the stages of liver disease? Yes. Firstly, there is normal liver. And then this normal liver goes on to develop fatty liver. Fatty liver goes on to developing hepatitis or liver fibrosis, and last stage is liver cirrhosis. So this is the end stage disease, liver cirrhosis, whereas all these stages is reversible. Cirrhosis, yes, it's a question mark. To some extent, it is still reversible, but once there is liver cirrhosis, it is like having diabetes or hypertension. You have to live with it forever. Then the treatment options would be limited. So what are the risk factors for alcoholic liver disease? Basically, as I mentioned, quantity of alcohol taken, that 40 to 80 gram in men or 20 to 40 gram in women increases the risk of hepatitis. And also pattern of drinking. Drinking outside of mealtime increases the risk of up to thrice. So that is another thing. And coming to gender, as I mentioned, women are double or thrice as susceptible as men. So we cannot compare women and men here. Everywhere women equality is there, but here I think women are more susceptible. And another thing is hepatitis C infection. Concomitant hepatitis C infection strongly accelerates the process of liver injury. So if a person has hepatitis C and they take alcohol, they are at higher risk of developing liver disease when compared to person without hepatitis C when they consume alcohol. I think Orissa, West Bengal, those belt has a higher incidence of hepatitis C when compared to southern India. Other thing, as I mentioned, it's the genetic factors. So we really cannot compare. And diet, if there is associated malnutrition like vitamin A, vitamin E deficiency, it can worsen the alcohol-induced liver damage by preventing regeneration of hepatocytes. So whenever there is a damage, as a compensatory mechanism, there is regeneration of the hepatocytes. Because of the nutritional deficiency, these hepatocytes may not regenerate, thereby increasing the risk of liver disease. So what are the symptoms? So, most of the time they are asymptomatic. That's the unfortunate thing. The symptoms happen only when the significant liver is damaged. Say once the liver is damaged by more than 80%, that is when they develop symptoms. Symptoms, as I mentioned, vary based on how bad the disease is. You may not have symptoms in the early stages. Instead, it worsens after a period of. So usual symptoms include abdominal pain, abdominal swelling or bloating because of fluid accumulation, which we call it as ascites. Decreased appetite, weight loss, nausea, vomiting, fatigue, dry mouth, increased thirst, and bleeding from the enlarged veins in the wall of the lower esophagus, which we call it as esophageal varices. These varices are not there in normal population. These esophageal varices develop when there is liver cirrhosis, and these are enlarged abnormal blood vessels which can open up anytime, can cause blood vomiting or blood in the stools or black stools. So we should always tell patient, whenever there is black stools, please meet us immediately. They always think the black stool is because of the beetroot I ingested or I have taken ragi, all those things. But black stools, unless proved otherwise, it is bleeding from the stomach and intestine. So whenever there is blood, it mixes with acid, digestive juices, it causes black discoloration. And Skin problems like yellowish discoloration, which is nothing but jaundice, that is how most of the patients present to us. Sir, everything is yellow, what should I do? And on examination, we can see small red spider-like veins on the skin, which we call it as spider navy. Sometimes because of bleeding, that can have pale skin, redness of feet or hands, and itching. Itching basically because of cholestasis. And also, liver is the organ wherein the chemicals are filtered. So liver usually is like kidney, like it's an engine for the body. When there is liver disease, some of the chemicals like ammonia, it escapes the liver, affects the brain, and they become altered behavior. We call it as hepatic encephalopathy. So they present with problems with thinking, memory, mood, fainting, lightheadedness, numbness, legs and feet. This is especially because there is associated vitamin B12 deficiency because of alcohol indulgence. So whenever there is vitamin B12 deficiency, they have the whole set of neurological symptoms as well. So how does alcohol cause liver disease? So this is the pathophysiology. So whenever one consumes alcohol, this is converted to acetaldehyde, and this acetaldehyde again causes NADH production, oxidative stress, which causes hepatocyte injury, and this NADH2 production increases the lipogenesis and decreases the fatty acid oxidation, thereby increasing the fatty acid within the hepatocyte. So what happens is, if there is fatty acid oxidation, fatty acid gets spliced, which is decreased. At the same time, there is increase in lipogenesis, which causes fatty liver, and there is oxidative stress, lipid peroxidation, which causes hepatocyte injury. At the same time, because of alcohol, there is gut-derived endotoxin, which stimulates Kupffer cells within the liver. So liver has got hepatocytes and Kupffer cells. Kupffer cells are like macrophages. This increases the cytokine release. They cause cytokine release like TNF alpha and other inflammatory mediators. This again stimulates hepatic stellate cells. These are the cells which increases the fibrosis. They promote collagen synthesis, which causes fibrosis, which later develops cirrhosis. This is in short. It's a very, very complex mechanism. However, this is in short. This is how alcohol causes liver disease. And why fatty liver? Like I mentioned, alcohol is metabolized by alcohol dehydrogenase into acetaldehyde. This acetaldehyde is converted to acetic acid, which is finally oxidized into carbon dioxide and water. During this reaction, there is high NADH2 concentration. There is synthesis of NADH2 and decrease in NAD. The combination of these two causes increase in triglyceride accumulation within the liver, which causes fatty liver. So this is the basic pathogenesis. So as I mentioned, these are the common symptoms like weakness, nausea, pain, loss of appetite, malaise. That is in general for fatty liver. If they have hepatitis is nothing but inflammation of hepatocyte, and there is because of inflammatory cytokines. Whenever they have acute hepatitis, they develop right upper quadrant pain. So this is pain or tenderness in the right upper quadrant, that is where the liver is situated. And they also have jaundice, malaise. Sometimes in severe alcoholic hepatitis, even though there is no infection, we see fever as well. This is one thing which we need to remember, because most of the physicians who treat them with antibiotic, no, there is no need of antibiotics because of hepatitis per se. More of inflammation rather than infection. And as I mentioned, once there is liver cirrhosis, this is the last stage of the liver disease, marked by inflammation, fibrosis, damaged membranes, preventing detoxification of chemicals in the body, leading to scarring and necrosis. Patients with liver cirrhosis over a period of time develop into end-stage liver disease, liver failure, multi-organ failure, hepatocellular carcinoma, and death. Thus, this progression is attributed to recurrent cirrhosis-related complications, including bacterial infection. The only definitive modality once they develop liver cirrhosis is liver transplantation. So these are the symptoms in general. They come with pedal edema, lot of itchiness because of cholestasis, weight loss, yellowish discoloration of skin, fluid accumulation, which we call it as ascites, and this is the one which we're telling about, spider navy, spider-like blood vessels on the skin, and redness of palms and hands because of vasodilatation. So how do we investigate once we develop liver disease? Yes, one thing is liver function test. So liver function test is a whole battery of blood investigations, including bilirubin, AST, ALT, alkaline phosphatase, GGT, albumin, everything. So here what we look at is albumin levels. Usually they would be low, and prothrombin time or INR. See, liver is a place where vitamin K dependent procoagulate factors are synthesized. So whenever there is liver cirrhosis or liver damage or hepatitis, these procoagulant factors are not synthesized, thereby the extrinsic pathway gets affected. So the PT or INR, if it's elevated, it indicates that there is significant liver damage. And also this indicates the hepatic protein synthesis. Basically, these are coagulate factors are also protein. Albumin also is protein. So whenever there is a chronically injured liver disease, whenever there is protein synthesis affected, this patient will have low albumin and high INR. This is a indication of liver dysfunction. Similarly, AST, ALT that can get elevated, which indicates hepatocellular injury. Alphas, which indicates cholestasis. If there is obstruction of the bile, then it causes increase in alkaline phosphatase. At the same time, bilirubin will be elevated. So again, in bilirubin, we have direct and indirect. So usually in alcoholic hepatitis, what we look at is direct bilirubin, which gets elevated. Again, if you ask me endoscopy, why is it required? Yes, any patient with liver disease, endoscopy is a must because it can both be diagnostic as well as therapeutic. Endoscopy is to look for the varices. Any patient with liver disease, they are prone to develop varices. They come to us only with the complication. That is, once they bleed, they come with variceal bleeding. So we don't want them to bleed and come. We always do endoscopy in each and every patient. If there is esophageal varices, we give beta blockers like carvedilol or propranolol, or we may have to do endoscopic variceal banding. By doing banding, the chances of bleeding would be prevented. So liver biopsy, it's an invasive procedure. We hardly do nowadays, wherein a small piece of liver is tissue is removed to examine. However, yes, there are certain rare indications. If a patient with AST elevations that persists for more than 6 months, even if the patient is asymptomatic, or you have evidence of liver failure in addition to elevated these transaminases. However, if there is coagulopathy, see, basically liver biopsy is done with ultrasound guidance. When we do, there can be chances of bleeding. So if there is coagulopathy, high INR, we do it by what is known as transjugular biopsy, wherein you go through the internal jugular vein, go to the heart, go to the inferior vena cava, into the liver and take biopsy. It's a simple procedure, even though you may think that we are going through the heart. It's a simple procedure. So these are all very rarely indicated in patients whom diagnosis of alcoholic hepatitis is uncertain. Sometimes they have mild hepatitis, insignificant alcohol. We don't know whether it's because of alcohol or is there something else like autoimmune hepatitis going on, those sort of types. Okay. And also patient may have a co-infection with hepatitis C. So other thing is imaging test. So what are the imaging testing? Usually we can go ahead with ultrasound, MRI or CT scan, which can show liver cirrhosis. Usually what we do is ultrasound first. If it is inconclusive or if there is some element of doubt of hepatocellular carcinoma or portal vein thrombosis, then we go ahead with CT or MRI. So what are the complications of liver disease? One, as I mentioned, is portal hypertension. It's a complication due to cirrhosis, which causes elevated in portal pressure. And the symptoms of portal hypertension are ascites, hepatic encephalopathy, pancytopenia. Yes, that is because they have splenomegaly. Whenever there is liver disease, they have splenomegaly, which can cause pancytopenia or thrombocytopenia. This I would tell even to my patient because their platelet count will always be on the lower side because of liver disease. So what happens is they go to their local physicians due to fever. Fever is there, then platelet counts are 80,000. They will tell, no boss, you have dengue, you get admitted. One patient had called me telling, sir, I got admitted for 2 weeks. My platelet counts are not improving. Every day they are giving me platelets. I asked him, do you have fever? I told him, no, sir, one day I had fever. Afterwards, there is no fever. So I told him, first you get discharged, otherwise lifelong you should be taking platelets because he has thrombocytopenia as a part of hypersplenism. So if you give platelets, it will be there for 2 days. Again, next day it will have hypersplenism, and again there will be thrombocytopenia. So even I tell the patient that your platelet counts will be low, don't worry about it. That is not going to cause you problem unless it's less than 20,000. And please inform your doctor as well. Then the patient got discharged. So 2 weeks unnecessarily was in hospital taking platelets every day, other day, and drinking a lot of papaya juice, kiwi fruit juice, and all those medications. No, this is a sign of liver disease. And most dreaded is hematemesis or melena. Melena, as I told, is black tarry stools. If it is there, sorry, if it is there, that indicates there is internal or GI bleed. Varices, as I mentioned, this is nothing but abnormal enlarged blood vessels which is within the esophagus. When they bleed, it causes black tarry, bloody stools, lightheadedness. If there is sudden hypotension, they causes lightheadedness, paleness, vomiting, or blood vomiting. So, and another complication which we see is ascites, nothing but accumulation of fluid in the peritoneal cavity, which is depicted in the figure, in the diagram here. They come with the swelling of ankles, shortness of breath, digestive issues, back pain, difficulty in sweating, and fatigue because of these symptoms. And again, how do we diagnose? As I mentioned, ultrasound or CT scan. Treatment is usually salt restriction is the most important thing, and high protein diet. These two are very, very important. Apart from that, what we can do is we do paracentesis. Paracentesis is putting a needle into the abdominal cavity, remove the fluid, send it for analysis. At the same time, it is both diagnostic and therapeutic. It will give us the diagnosis as well as once we remove, they will have symptomatic relief also. And then we start them on diuretics, aldactone and that is spironolactone and furosemide. As I mentioned, hepatic encephalopathy is another complication. It's nothing but decline in brain function because of liver disease. And as I mentioned, whenever there is liver disease, it can't remove adequate toxins, especially like ammonia, which goes to the brain and affects them. They come with agitation, confusion, disorientation, muscle tremors, difficulty in speaking. In serious cases, they can come in hepatic coma. That is, they come with coma stage, and once we decrease ammonia, they go back walking. So this is something which is very gratifying. They come in encephalopathy with a Glasgow coma scale of 3. And once we give lactulose syrup, all rifaximin and everything, within 2 days, they go back home walking. So the treatment again is abstinence. That's the most important thing. Nutritional or diet, good amount of protein intake. Most important thing medication wise is rifaximin and lactulose. Rifaximin is a gut specific antibiotic which decreases the ammonia level, and the lactulose again it improves ammonia level. And final option is always liver transplantation, which is the definitive treatment for liver disease. Again, as I told, diagnostic test even in hepatic encephalopathy is almost the same. Here, important things is we have to look for sodium potassium level, because whenever a patient with liver cirrhosis, there is sodium and potassium fluctuation, they can go into hepatic encephalopathy. And also we check for ammonia level, which will tell, yes, this is hepatic encephalopathy, this is not stroke or other metabolic encephalopathy. CT in the head, CT scan of head or MRI of head, very rarely indicated. If there is history of fall, sometimes these alcoholic patients, they fall down, there is internal bleeding, that also can cause hepatic coma. So only in those sort of situations we do neuroimaging, otherwise we don't do. Again, liver function test, again it's done to assess the severity of liver disease, like I mentioned. So this is the last slide. So how do we prevent liver disease? Limit intake of saturated trans fat. This is in general, not only alcohol. Quit smoking. Eat balanced diet. Exercise, very important. Limit consumption of refined carbohydrate like sugar. Limit or avoid alcohol. Maintain healthy weight and take medications as prescribed. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for your informative presentation. Now, I invite the moderator for this webinar, Dr. Dhirendra Singh, to take the session ahead and request all the attendees to jot down their queries in the Q&A section.
Thank you so much, Adarsh sir, for elaborating us so nicely. In very short span of time, you gave us a very good idea, very good information to all my budding dental surgeons as well as the faculty members of KIDS. So I request all the students and faculty members to ask the questions. I guess 3 questions are there is still on their screen also, sir. If you can see in your question answers sections.
Okay. Yeah. Is there any advanced association between advancing age and NAFLD? Yeah, it's a very, very this thing which I didn't speak about. NAFLD is now, we are in COVID pandemic, but I would tell you we are in fatty liver pandemic as well. We see fatty livers day in and day out. According to this question, it's NAFLD, means non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. No, there is no association between advancing age and NAFLD. We have seen NAFLD even in children. Basically, it's the lifestyle which causes NAFLD: overweight, obesity, diabetes, high cholesterol, hypothyroidism. These are the things which cause NAFLD. So there is no association directly per se with advancing age. But if the lifestyle habits are bad, yes, they can develop NAFLD.
Thank you. So
and another thing
we are saying in calcium supplementation is necessary for the patient with liver cirrhosis.
Sorry.
So they are asking that there is calcium supplementation is necessary for the patient.
Second question. I am coming to that. Is calcium? Usually yes, because calcium, vitamin D synthesis happens in the liver. So in a patient with liver cirrhosis, vitamin D would be low. So usually we would give calcium and vitamin D supplementation, and also most of them would be on diuretics. So whenever they are on diuretics, they lose calcium as well. So that time also it can cause muscular cramps and other things. So calcium supplementation, yes, we would do. And
that's a very important question by all the people who take drink.
What is the safe limit of alcohol to drink? As I told, 10 gram for me, maybe 20 gram for you. So we really cannot tell, but in general, as I told, less than 40 gram per day. 10 gram is 30 ml of whiskey or 250 ml of beer. So that is how in general, but lesser you drink, better it is. Because especially what is low for me is maybe high for other person. So many times I ask, that is very rare, sir. I ask them, what do you mean by that? Do you take once in, how often do you think? Then they tell, only morning and the afternoon I take, night times during sleep I never take. So for them that is rare. So So we need to quantify what is it before we conclude.
And what are the other toxic substances there that will do damage to the liver?
Yeah,
There
that's
are
another important thing. See, like other toxins in the sense like smoking can cause aflatoxin, like with mushroom poisoning, even medications. So toxin, most common thing is medications. What medications? Like TB medicine, some of the antibiotics can cause, some of the anti-epileptics can cause. Even now, I think we have seen a lot of herbal medicines, Ayurveda medicine related drug-induced liver injuries. I mean, we have published paper also, but then somehow government is reluctant to accept herbal medicines are toxic to liver. I mean, yeah, we have a lot of evidence for it that medications. I'm not telling allopathy doesn't have side effect. We know even if there is a TB medicine, we know which causes, how to treat everything. However, unfortunately, in herbal medicine, nobody has idea what it has. So yes, the toxins in general, medications.
Yes. So as we were discussing about the Ayurvedic medicine, sir, one very famous medicine in the market, Leaf 52. Leaf 52 and Leaf 52 DS, it is coming, and people, those who are drinking, they are thinking that if after drinking, they are taking 2 tablets in the morning, 2 tablets in the night, after Leaf 52 DS or Leaf 52. So they are happy that nothing will happen to them. So I'm not saying same, sir. I just want to tell whether
whenever patient asks me this, if 52, I tell them you can buy it if you have any shares in that. Otherwise, it's of no use. So basically, Leaf 52 is as good as placebo. There are studies to tell that. Unfortunately, is one of the top 10 medications in India which is being sold. Even to be frank, even I used to prescribe during my MBBS days Leaf 52, thinking it's the thing. But once I did gastroenterology, we know that it's of no use. I have never prescribed. In fact, sometimes it can be harmful. See, if it is not harmful, I don't mind you taking or spending money. But if it can be harmful, I wouldn't recommend. So definitely, we are against Leaf 52 or all these medications. If you show me the data, I would accept it. When there is no data, I would not accept. We always tell, in God we believe. For everything else we require evidence. So without evidence, I cannot believe it.
Thank you, sir. And so same time, sir, as Leaf 52, the people use to get detoxified their liver. So is there any routine diet supplement or any routine changes in the lifestyles how we can change or we can detox our liver in the routine process? Is it any possible?
Basically, good amount of fruits, good amount of vegetables, and antioxidants. Antioxidants in general are good. So usually whenever we prescribe any medication, we give them good amount of zinc. Like people are taking it for COVID. So that is going to help for all liver disease as well. So zinc helps in lymphatic regeneration. So high zinc containing multivitamins are what we prescribe. Otherwise, healthy lifestyle, good amount of green leafy vegetables are good enough. Because people ask me, which vegetable is good for liver? And there is nothing specific as such. Everything has a few things which complement each other. So we should indulge in all sorts of fruits and vegetables in general, which will be good for health and healthy liver. Avoid sweets. Sweets, this Pepsi, Cokes, and all those refined sugars, they are very bad for liver. Many times they always give a catchy finding that there is no, it does not contain any sugar, but they contain saccharin and other things which are worse for liver. So definitely, I mean, we should avoid artificial sweeteners and sweets.
So, few questions I'm receiving on my WhatsApp, sir. How do you assess the severity of liver disease?
Yeah, I didn't go up on that. See, basically, a severity of liver disease, one, as clinically, if there is ascites, if there is a history of GI bleed, definitely it's a significant liver disease. And most of the time, we do what is known as MELD scoring, model for end-stage liver disease, MELD score, which comprises of 3 variables. One is creatinine, bilirubin, and INR. Now we have MELD sodium, which includes sodium score as well. So we have a scoring that's calculated. If you can see in your apps or mobile, you can calculate. If the score is less than 15, it's okay. If it's more than 15, it indicates they require liver transplantation. Another is child Turcotte scoring, CTP score. That's again based on bilirubin, INR, ascites, hepatic encephalopathy, and serum albumin. Depending on these 5 variables, we classify it as A, B, C. A can be managed medically, B may require transplant, C will require only transplant. That is how we classify or stratify liver disease.
Good, sir. So should we get our liver tested even I'm healthy, I'm not finding any liver disease symptoms? Still should be I go for, or our people should go for the liver test, routine liver test?
Yeah, that's a very good, important question. Yes, once 40 plus, I think I would suggest everybody to undergo ultrasound and liver function at least once in 2 years. So, and many times we see fatty liver, people tend to disregard it. It's everybody has fatty liver, so what's big thing about it? But no, yes, fatty liver, if there are 100 people with fatty liver, 20 to 30% of them may end up with liver cirrhosis. So who will develop, who will not develop, we don't know. If they have fatty liver, then we would do liver function test. And now we do also what is known as fibroscan. Fibroscan is a test wherein which will assess the amount of fibrosis within the liver. So that is the patient at risk of liver cirrhosis. So definitely once in 2 years, after 40 years is what we would recommend. If there is diabetes, hypertriglyceridemia, thyroid, all those things, then it may be required more frequently.
Thank you, sir. Even I will go for the test regularly because I'm not having any symptom, but still, sir, I'll follow the instructions were given by you, sir. Sir, are there any medications or supplements that can hurt my liver? Because nowadays everyone is taking many medicals.
Yeah, definitely. As I mentioned,
Supplements.
antibiotics, antitubercular, anti-epileptics can cause. At the same time, many of the herbal medicines, you take herbal tea and herbal this thing, especially during COVID, people used to see a lot of herbal medications, kashaya, all those things. Everything is safe when it's given in right dose. Once anything which is too much can cause damage to the liver. So yes, herbal medications are known to cause, and also many of the over-the-counter drugs like NSAIDs and these things can cause damage to the liver.
Thank you so much, sir. We have many questions to ask you. Even that is a great honor for us if you will come personally to the Kalinga Institute of Dental Sciences, KTM University, Bhubaneswar. It will be our privilege and honor on behalf of Professor Achyuta Samanta sir, our honorable founder, on behalf of our Dr. Jogajyoti Patil sir, Assistant Director Admin, our Principal Ashwini Kumar sir. I personally request you and invite you to visit our institutions, sir, personally, and enlighten us. And nowadays we are facing one very big issue in every institution, everywhere in India, that young generation, when they are first leaving their home and they are joining some school and colleges especially, and they are getting freedom from their family, from their parents, immediately they are getting indulged into the alcoholism, into the drugs. So that is a very bad phase we are facing. We are seeing as a doctors, as a teacher also, we are seeing it. So definitely, sir, the motivation from the doctors like you is really important and really very much need of the hour this time. So thank you so much, sir, from the family of KIDS and KID Jimtib University. Thank you so much, sir. Over to Sakshi.
Thank you, doctors.
Yeah, thank you.
I would hereby like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Adarsh for delivering such an important and informative talk. I also thank Dr. Achyuta Samanta, Dr. Jogajyoti Patil, Dr. Ashwini Kumarkar, Dr. Dhirendra Singh, staff and students of Kalinga Institute of Dental Sciences, Bhubaneswar, Odisha, for making this webinar successful. With that, we come towards the end of this webinar. I and entire team of Plasmagen Biosciences sign off here. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So once again, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Sakshi, Dr. Rekha, Pooja, everyone, for organizing such a great event for my entire faculty members, for students of the KIDS. We are hoping that in future also you'll be organizing such very informative webinars to our faculty members, to our students. And as I requested Dr. Adarsh sir to please visit Bhubaneswar personally and visit our university, KID University. We are having a very good university here, sir, KID Jimtib University. So please visit. With Sakshi, Rekha, you are also invited. So you also should come and do this initiative for our every student, not only the KIDS, for our all 27,000 students of KID Jimtib University. So thank you so much, everyone, for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you, students, faculty members, for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.